The studio lights were hot, the cameras rolled, and the tension was sharp enough to slice through steel. Jill Biden sat composed, polished in posture and tone, ready to speak on education and leadership. What she didn't expect was Denzel Washington walking onto the set, uninvited, unannounced, and unapologetic. "Let's cut the showmanship," Denzel began, his voice like gravel under pressure. "America deserves the truth, and I'm not here to dance around it." The host froze. The audience fell into a stunned silence. Jill raised an eyebrow, trying to retain grace. "Denzel, I wasn't informed you'd be joining." "That's the point," he shot back. "No one's being informed. About anything." The audience stirred. Phones came out. Clips were already uploading to X. Denzel turned to Jill, eyes locked. "Your husband is struggling. And every time someone questions it, the narrative is spun, the cameras redirected, the truth buried." Jill leaned forward, calm but defensive. "He's capable. He's working hard for this country." "Is he? Or are you working hard to cover for him?" Denzel's tone wasn't accusatory, it was surgical. "You're a former educator. You know when someone's cognitive lights are dimming. So tell the people the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The host tried to pivot. "Let's stay on topic." "This is the topic," Denzel snapped. "Leadership. Accountability. Transparency. If we can't speak the truth on national television, then what exactly are we protecting?" Jill's voice lowered. "My loyalty is to my husband. And to this nation." "Then prove it," Denzel said. "Because loyalty without truth isn't love, it's enablement." The air grew thick. You could hear hearts pounding. Even the stage crew had stopped moving. What started as a polite interview had morphed into a national reckoning, live before millions. And Denzel wasn't done. Jill Biden's expression tightened the moment the camera panned to her. They were mid-broadcast, with millions watching across the country, and Denzel Washington wasn't holding back. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of 1,000 truths the administration had long tiptoed around. "You knew," Denzel said, his eyes locked on hers. "You knew the public was being lied to. And you let it happen. You played along." Jill straightened in her seat, her smile polite but strained. "Mr. Washington, with all due respect." "No," he interrupted, raising a hand, "don't throw that phrase around like a shield. With all due respect doesn't erase accountability. You're not just the First Lady. You're a voice. A presence. And your silence has become complicity." The studio was eerily quiet. Even the producers behind the cameras seemed frozen. Jill looked to the host for an interjection, but he remained silent, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. "America doesn't need rehearsed statements," Denzel continued. "We need transparency. We need honesty. And if the president is struggling, if he's not fit to serve, it's not just a private family matter anymore. It's a national one." Jill's demeanor shifted. She wasn't the polished diplomat now. She was a wife caught in the storm. "Do you understand what it's like to see someone you love torn apart in public?" she shot back. "To watch them stumble, not from weakness, but from being exhausted by the very people who claim to care?" Denzel didn't flinch. "Yes, I do. But love without truth becomes protection at the expense of millions. That's not love. That's damage control." The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just watched, captivated by a moment that felt less like television and more like a reckoning. Jill's eyes didn't flinch, but the air around her thickened. She adjusted her mic, trying to regain control. "Mr. Washington," she said with a composed smile that didn't touch her eyes, "you're speaking about a country that needs unity, not division." Denzel leaned forward, the studio lights catching the determination in his face. "Unity doesn't come from cover-ups, ma'am. It comes from honesty. And I didn't come here to pat anyone on the back while the country's bleeding from wounds no one in your circle seems to want to acknowledge." The room held its breath. "What wounds exactly?" Jill shot back, her voice firmer now. "This administration has fought for education, healthcare, and recovery. Denzel raised his hand, cutting her off, not rudely, but sharply. Recovery built on what? Student debt still shackling millions? Veterans still waiting in lines? Black communities still over-policed and underfunded? Don't tell me about policy wins when the people can't feel them. A few audience members applauded. Jill's smile dropped. Denzel, she tried again, this time softer, we're working every day to fix what we inherited. He let out a quiet, disbelieving chuckle. That excuse is old. You're not just inheriting problems. You're repeating them. Only dressed up nicer. Stephen Colbert, sensing the tension rise, looked toward the camera crew as if wondering whether to step in. But no one moved. Everyone was locked in. Jill's hands tightened in her lap. So what exactly are you suggesting? That we're deliberately lying to the American people? Denzel didn't blink. I'm saying if you keep dodging the truth, that's exactly what it looks like. A beat passed. Then he added, with the calm fury of a man who had seen too much for too long, and if truth makes people uncomfortable, good. It should. The audience was dead silent, watching a confrontation that wasn't about politics anymore, it was about responsibility. Jill Biden wasn't just defending an administration. She was defending a legacy. And Denzel? He was defending reality. And he wasn't done yet. Jill straightened in her chair, her polished demeanor cracking ever so slightly. You're painting with a very broad brush, Mr. Washington. There are good people working every day in this administration to solve these issues. Denzel tilted his head. Then where's the accountability? Where's the urgency? You keep saying good people, but I don't care how good they are if they're silent when it matters. Silence, First Lady, is not neutral, it's complicit. A few audible murmurs swept through the audience. Colbert's brow was furrowed now, visibly caught between his role as host and the wildfire sparking between his guests. Jill leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering into a tone reserved for campaign trail rebuttals. You're simplifying an incredibly complex system. Change takes time. And in the meantime, Denzel cut in, how many more kids get shot in schools? How many families live paycheck to paycheck while Congress debates their worth like it's a game? Time isn't a luxury some of us have, especially not the people your policies forget. The live audience stirred again, shifting in their seats. That's unfair, Jill snapped, her voice rising now. We're doing everything we can within the limits of law and process. Denzel's expression hardened. No, what's unfair is sending your sons and daughters to war and coming back to nothing. What's unfair is hearing campaign promises vanish the moment the election's over. What's unfair, Mrs. Biden, is a country that expects grace from the wounded but gives none in return. Jill inhaled sharply, her staff off camera visibly tensed. Colbert interjected lightly, maybe we can, but Denzel wasn't finished. His voice dropped to a low, firm burn. Let me ask you one thing, Dr. Biden. Not as a politician's wife, not as the First Lady, but as an American, when was the last time someone in power told the truth, even when it made them look bad? Jill didn't respond. Not immediately. And that silence? It was deafening. Jill's silence lingered, stretching just long enough to make every viewer at home shift in their seat. Colbert tried to ease the tension with a half-smile, well, that got real. But Denzel didn't crack a smile. It is real. That's the problem. Too many folks are dying quietly while we applaud polished answers on TV. Jill leaned back, crossing her arms, the smile now gone completely. You're making it sound like we're sitting in the White House doing nothing but drinking tea and dodging blame. I'm making it sound like people are tired, Denzel replied calmly, but with fire behind his eyes. Tired of being told to wait. Tired of their pain being called a process. She blinked. And what do you suggest? Chaos? Throwing institutions out the window? No, Denzel said. I'm suggesting truth. Leadership. A voice that doesn't shake when it's time to name names. Because if we can't be honest on live television, how in the world are we going to be honest in rooms with no cameras? Colbert glanced nervously at the control booth. Jill's voice sharpened. It's easy to preach when you're not the one making life-or-death decisions every day. I've had to bury friends who were killed in wars this government couldn't even explain, Denzel shot back. I've had to comfort mothers whose sons were killed by systems designed to forget them. Don't talk to me about life and death like I haven't stared both in the face. The audience broke into stunned applause. Not loud. Not thunderous. But slow, intentional. Like they were agreeing with a truth they'd been afraid to say aloud. Jill looked off camera, her composure cracking just enough to show she hadn't expected this to be anything more than a controlled appearance. A press-friendly moment. But now, the moment belonged to something else entirely. Denzel leaned back, eyes locked on her. This isn't personal, Jill. It's public. That's what leadership is. Jill took a deep breath, then leaned forward, her voice lower, more controlled. Do you think it's easy? Waking up every day knowing no matter what you do, half the country will hate you for it? Denzel didn't blink. That's not leadership. That's PR management. She flinched. You're not there to be liked, Jill, he continued. You're there to tell the truth, even when it costs votes. Even when it makes people uncomfortable. Even when your own team tells you to smile and dodge. Colbert tried to interject. Okay, let's bring this back to. No, Denzel cut him off without taking his eyes off Jill. Let's not bring it back. Let's stay right here. Where it's raw. Where it's real. The audience held their breath. Jill's expression tightened, but she didn't look away. You know what hurts? Denzel asked. Watching black communities plead for help, not just for money, but for justice, for acknowledgement. And what do they get? An initiative here. A press conference there. Then silence. Then another funeral. You think we don't care? Jill snapped. You think we don't lose sleep over this? I think you've gotten used to managing grief instead of fixing the system that causes it, Denzel said coldly. Silence fell again. And this time, even Colbert didn't speak. Jill glanced toward the producers off camera, clearly debating whether to end the segment. But Denzel pressed on. You're a teacher. You know what it means to fight for people who don't have power. So why is it, when you sit next to power, you go quiet? I haven't gone quiet, Jill insisted. But I'm not going to shout just to be heard. Denzel nodded slowly. Then speak louder, not in volume, but in truth. The camera zoomed in on Jill's face, her lips pressed together. Her eyes slightly glassy. But she didn't back down. Maybe you're right, she said softly. Denzel sat back, his voice calmer now. That's a start. The audience exhaled, as if they'd all been holding their breath for the past 5 minutes. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted. What had started as a confrontation now hung in the air as a challenge. A dare to do better, Colbert shifted in his seat, clearly unsure whether to step in or stay silent. For once, the host of late-night levity seemed caught in the weight of the moment. But Denzel, still composed, didn't let up. You don't get to sit in the comfort of the White House and say, we're trying. Not when mothers are burying their children, he said. Not when schools in poor communities still have lead in the pipes. Not when entire neighborhoods are forgotten until election season. Jill's voice hardened. We've passed bills. We've signed reforms. We've fought the court. What more do you want? Truth, Denzel said. Accountability. Not just from the other side, from yours too. Because every time you point a finger, 3 more are pointing back. She swallowed hard, her polished poise beginning to crack under the pressure of live TV. Do you know how many times I've sat with families who've lost everything? Denzel continued. Not as a celebrity. As a man. A black man. And every time, they ask the same thing, do they even care about us? And I never know what to say anymore. The room fell completely still. Jill's eyes narrowed slightly, more out of pain than anger. Do you think I don't care? she said quietly. That I haven't walked into hospital rooms, or schools without roofs, or hugged the mothers you're talking about? I think caring isn't enough anymore, Denzel replied. I think America's tired of empathy that doesn't turn into action. Suddenly, someone from the audience clapped. Then another. And another. The ripple of reaction startled even Colbert. But Denzel didn't smile. He didn't perform. He simply leaned forward one last time. Don't hide behind party lines or polished statements. People want something real, and if you can't give them that, they'll find someone who will. Jill looked away for a second, and when she returned her gaze, something in her had changed. A layer peeled back. Not defeated, but maybe, shaken. Colbert finally spoke, breaking the stillness. Well. That was not your usual segment on infrastructure spending. Laughter. Nervous. But it broke the silence. Denzel leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, unbothered. I came here to talk, he said calmly. I'm just not interested in bedtime stories. The commercial break ended, but the room hadn't reset. Jill Biden sat still, her expression more thoughtful now, less defensive, more engaged. Denzel, however, remained a storm contained in stillness. Stephen Colbert tried to lighten the air. So, Denzel, you planning to run for office? Because Twitter just melted down. The audience chuckled, but Denzel didn't bite. I don't want the office, he said. I want those in it to remember why they're there. He turned slightly back to Jill. When people see you, they don't see policy. They see power. And with that comes responsibility, not just reaction. Jill leaned forward, trying to recenter. And I respect that. But it's not always black and white. There are systems. Red tape. Compromise. And while you're navigating systems, Denzel said, real people are drowning. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was heavy. The kind that lives in hospitals and courtrooms. The kind that follows loss. Jill didn't fight back this time. She looked at Denzel and asked, sincerely, then what would you do? If you were sitting in my seat right now, what would you change first? The room leaned in. Denzel took a moment, eyes lowered, hands clasped. I'd stop telling people we're working on it, he said. I'd start showing them we've already started. And how? She pressed. I'd walk the neighborhoods unannounced. No media. No entourage. I'd sit in a barber shop. In a high school lunchroom. In a church basement. I'd listen. Then I'd bring their words back into your halls. Their voices. Not as quotes in speeches. As decisions on paper. Jill nodded slowly. That's fair. But Denzel wasn't finished. And I'd make damn sure no one who profits from their pain gets a seat at any table. That line hit like a gavel. The crowd erupted. It wasn't applause, it was release. Frustration, fury, hope, all finding oxygen in one man's refusal to play along. Colbert looked at both guests, wide-eyed. Ladies and gentlemen. I think we just had church. The studio laughed, but this time it was different. Grounded. Moved. Denzel looked at Jill once more. You don't have to be the problem to be part of the solution. But you do have to show up. Jill nodded again. This time, slower. He'd reached her. And the nation was still watching. As the applause settled, the room felt altered. It wasn't just a segment anymore, it was a reckoning. Something about the rawness of Denzel's delivery had torn through the theater of politics and reached for something more human. Jill Biden adjusted in her seat. The practiced poise of a first lady was still there, but now softened. Wounded, perhaps. Or awakened. She turned to Denzel and said quietly, You think I've never sat in a church basement? Denzel didn't flinch. I think you did. I just don't think you stayed long enough. That hit hard, but it didn't break her. Jill looked to the audience, then back at him. You're right, she admitted. It's easy to go back to comfort. Especially when comfort means silence. And silence becomes complicity, Denzel added. Stephen Colbert, sensing the heaviness, cut in with a wry smile. So, should I even ask what dinner at the White House is like after this? The crowd laughed, but it was tense, nervous laughter. No one wanted to break the moment. Jill sighed. This isn't about dinners, Stephen. It's about dignity. She looked straight at Denzel. You're not wrong. We've failed to speak in a language people actually hear. We say we care, but we say it from 10 feet above the floor. Denzel nodded. 10 feet is the difference between hope and help. Colbert's tone shifted. Dr. Biden, with respect, what will you do differently when you leave this studio? The pause that followed was heavy. Jill's eyes didn't leave Denzel's. I'll stop talking to people, she said. And start talking with them. Denzel blinked. That answer wasn't rehearsed. Then maybe, he said, his voice quieting, we finally started the real conversation. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet. It was too sacred a moment. Too sincere. Jill extended her hand across the table, not as a political gesture, but as something deeper. A reaching out. Denzel looked at it for a second. Then shook it. And for once on live television, a handshake didn't feel staged. It felt earned. The studio lights dimmed slightly, not by design but by timing, as if even they understood something had shifted. Stephen Colbert looked out at the audience, then back to the two figures who had just turned what began as a heated clash into a national reflection. I gotta say, he began, his voice softer now, this might be the first time our ratings will spike not because of drama, but because of truth. The crowd laughed, but this time, the laughter had a pulse of respect behind it. Denzel leaned forward. People don't tune in for perfection, Stephen. They tune in for pain they recognize. And truth they've never heard spoken on air. Jill nodded, visibly moved. They deserve more than rehearsed compassion. Colbert grinned. Look at you two. Who knew a verbal boxing match would end in a joint press conference? No press, Denzel replied. Just presence. He stood up, not dramatically, but with quiet command. He turned to the crowd, locking eyes with no one and everyone at once. If there's one thing this country needs, he said, it's not another soundbite, it's soul. The silence that followed felt longer than it was. Then came a slow clap. Then another. Until the room erupted in a standing ovation, not for show, not for celebrity, but because something real had happened. Jill stood as well, wiping a single tear, not of defeat, but of clarity. As they walked off the stage, side by side, there was no backstage whisper, no media swarm, just a shared breath of understanding. In the control room, a producer muttered, "Did we just witness history or therapy?" Colbert chuckled. Maybe both. The credits rolled, but no one moved. Somewhere, in living rooms across America, people weren't changing the channel. They were changing their perspective. What began as a televised confrontation between a Hollywood icon and the First Lady turned into something far deeper, a public reckoning. In a world driven by spectacle, Denzel and Jill Biden dared to offer something rare, authenticity. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polite. But it was real. And maybe that's exactly what America needed to hear.